This is the landmark ranger station, and the purple boundary here is the actual boundary of the station. Each of these little pink boxes are the individual structures within that district. So I issued numbers to each of these properties, and they were based on, let me pull up a site form here. So they were based on actual information that was in the existing site form, but the landmark ranger station form was actually like 200 pages. So it was very difficult to find specific building information. And so I pulled out those pages and issued individual site numbers to those properties. That's a quick overview of what I did. Are there any questions on that?
Let me elaborate a little bit more. So because we have to do this in order to not lose a lot of legacy data, we also need to continue to do this moving forward, which is why we've been asking for those individual site forms. Because if we weren't asking you to do it right now, Shannon would be doing it when they came to us, and she's really got her hands full, doing it for all the hundreds of properties already. So we're trying to collect the data we need, but then, there's sort of a bigger issue at play here for particularly these Forest Service properties as an example, in that, if they're recorded only as one property, when then you come to us with a project on a single building within that property, we have to evaluate it as a historic district. I mean, it is by definition a historic district in that, it's a grouping of buildings related, either temporally or, by plan. And so we have to view it and evaluate the property and in each individual property or building within the property as a historic district. So if we don't have individual information about each of the elements within the district, it's hard for us to know if each building is contributing or not contributing and whether Section 106 is at play. So we need that information to understand the resources and understand whether we need to even consult on Section 106. So, I mean, I know that it's a little bit more complicated now, these steps, but I think moving forward, it'll be easier as we get down the road because that data will already be in the system and we'll know how to evaluate the properties and what's contributing or not contributing. Because right now, when we get a project for a property, there might be 2 sentences about the building and we just don't have enough information. So we've got to ask you to go back and provide us more information anyway. So it's the whole data migrating piece is very complicated, and I'm not sure if we were able to communicate that as well as we would like you to understand, but that's kind of the background on why we've been asking for that increased level of recordation on your part. Shane, you had a question?
Yeah, I do. And it's kind of two, and they're interrelated there to what you were just addressing. I think what I have in mind, though, also are sort of like these isolated homesteads or farmsteads we occasionally encounter where you've just got one primary residence and then maybe an outhouse, or a residence in a barn, or a residence, a barn and an outhouse, or something, or a residence in just a shed, or, so I'm wondering how that would apply. This obviously makes sense in a case like the landmark station, but in a more isolated case like that, where it's just really one building and some minor building, would that still be one form or 2 forms? That's my first question. The second one then, and I attended the session last week where you were sort of outlining the new system in general, but you said that every property will now get a Smithsonian trinomial number. Does that mean we're also going to one site form for both types of things, or is there still going to be a built resources form and an archaeology form? How does that look going forward?
Sure. Let me start with your first question. So when you have, you know, we, in all the work of our office, of course, we're using National Park Service guidance, National Register guidance, in particular with Section 106 work, because we're always evaluating whether, you know, a property is eligible for the National Register or not eligible for the National Register. So we're looking at, you know, when we look at property types, you know, the definitions that the Park Service provides in their guidance bulletins, primarily numbers 15 and 16. You know, the definition of a building, and I just opened it up here. A building such as a house, barn, church, or hotel or similar construction is created principally to shelter any form of human activity. Building may also be used to refer to a historically and functionally associated or related unit, such as a courthouse and jail or a house and barn. So I think that very specifically addresses the first part of your question. It would still be appropriate to record limited groupings of properties as a single property as a building type. Whereas a district, it says a district possesses a significant concentration, linkage, or continuity of site, building, structures, or objects united historically or aesthetically by plan or physical development. So that's how we, you know, we are looking at these different types of properties. And sometimes it can be gray, you know, but I think in terms of, you know, your house and shed or house and outhouse example, that's fairly clear cut, that we would look at it as a single property, a building. Whereas, you know, from our perspective, these Forest Service administrative sites, kind of much like we, you know, sort of look at them the same way we'd look at Forest Service rec residence sites. You know, they're groupings of buildings that are associated, and we have to look at them as a historic district and how they relate to each other and what would be contributing or non-contributing to those districts. And then you had another question, and I'm going to let Shannon answer that one. And Shannon, if you need a reminder, Shane can maybe.
Yeah, thanks, Tricia. That all makes sense on the explanation on buildings. I think that's spot on. Yeah, the question I had really, Shannon, is going forward, will we have one site form for archaeology sites and a different one for buildings, or will they become one and the same?
So there's a set of data that will be collected for all sites, all resource types. And so that would be the name and ownership and whether or not it's historic or prehistoric, a description, some eligibility information. All of that is consistent across all the resource types. And then there's a separate set of data collected based on the type of property that you're recording. So for instance, this is for the building site type. So that's where you'd have address and city and construction and materials, versus an archaeological site, which would have the primary site type and phase and artifact information, excavation and collection information, and like district. The only two fields, this is what I was kind of mentioning earlier, the only two fields that we collect for district, aside from those general fields, would be a boundary, description, and justification. So they are all in the same data set, but there's additional data points that are being collected based on the property type.
And I don't know if folks caught it as Shannon showed the drop-down screen, but we are adding a property type as linear sites, because those have always sort of given us a little bit of heartburn as to, you know, where they really belong. And we just decided they just belong as a separate type of resource because they really have their own unique characteristics. So hopefully that'll actually make things easier for folks. And the other thing I'll point out, some of you have heard this already if you were at any of the other sessions, but we've had to change our terminology a bit because the system can't really differentiate between a site in terms of an archaeological site versus a site form. So we're calling them resource records now, and it's really just terminology. And if you ever say site form to us, we'll know exactly what you're talking about. But we will be referring to them as resource records moving forward, so that our system doesn't get completely confused by our terminology. Richa, go ahead.
Yeah, I am a little concerned that this is definitely going to add to the workload of our staff. So I'm just curious with if Shannon can pull that the building form back up. Did I see some drop-down lists there? Is that are those populated? Can we get a sense of what people will be asked to provide?
Yes. You know, let me share. I did the actual site form that we have currently and kind of did some marking up on it based on what fields are going to be collected by the system automatically versus which fields we got rid of. So this is the current IHSI form. All of the green fields are things that the system will collect automatically. So the data entry for those will go away in some form. Like for instance, the project name and title will come from the data entry for the project. So there is still data entry, just one time. And then all the red fields are the fields that we omitted from the new system. So the basic data entries will be the property name, street, city. The county will be calculated from GIS, and then your construction date and the materials and eligibility. The big difference would be this comments field, which is now going to be, pardon me, broken up into 3 different fields where you have a property description, property history, which is not a required field, and then the National Register justification. But I can go back to just show you on the new form, and this is still under construction. So some things may be moved around. But yes, there's some drop downs here with dates. You've got your original function and use with all the drop downs. And then all the materials.
And just curious, since you've got materials there, the descriptive information there, what would you expect to see in the description narrative?
I will let Ashley take that.
Hi, Richa. It's Ashley. So what we would want in that description is what we sort of see in the current description. So we collect a lot of that information that is in those drop boxes, but normally we have information pertaining to, like, it's a 2-story Queen Anne with a wraparound porch, and all of that information would go in the description section, which most of the time is already included when somebody's in the current iteration of the site form. Same thing would be similar to like an archaeological site, how you would describe. It's just the description section.
Yeah, and just to point out and just sort of state, because you know, we haven't really said this, but you know, the reason we collect the data, the reason we ask for these things is they are things that we kind of need to evaluate the property and make an informed determination of eligibility. But most often we're not out in the field and we don't have the opportunity to see these properties firsthand. So we just, you know, need to collect enough information that we can understand the property and hopefully make, you know, a good informed decision. Steve, go ahead.
So you talked about having on these admin sites, rec residences, those types of properties that have multiple buildings and things like that. Are you going to have? I guess I'm thinking of the IHSI site form, and it has like a county number, and then you know it's kind of a strange number, I think, for all of us. But are you going to have more of that type of thing, or are you going to have some sort of Smithsonian type site number for all of those buildings?
Yeah, that's a good question, Steve. We are moving to a single number system. So all types of resources will receive Smithsonian trinomials in moving forward as we implement ICRIS. Those IHSI numbers were that information will be retained as legacy data and can be searched. You know, tabular data can search if that's the number you have. You can still search under that number, but they will all be issued just Smithsonian trinomials, which hopefully will keep things clearer. The other thing I'll add about those Smithsonian trinomials is those numbers will be auto-generated and issued as soon as whoever is filling out the site form hits the complete button. So that's not submit, it's complete. So you've done your research, you've filled in the site form, you're done with it. You're like, okay, I want to set this one aside. You'll hit complete at the bottom of the page, and a Smithsonian trinomial will be auto-generated and immediately there on your site form for you. So there won't be any more of that delay in getting those numbers into your own system anymore. So we're thinking that that's something hopefully that folks are going to be pleased about. We're happy to be moving into a single number system from our end of things.
Yeah, I think that will help all of us keep everything a little more clear and understandable.
Yeah, we agree.
Okay. Cool.
That
Thank
was,
you.
know, a quirk of our, you know, just how things evolved in our office. And we're trying to take care of as many of those quirks as we can as we implement ICRIS. Are there any other comments or questions or just anything? Shannon can share if you'd like, as she
Trisha.
just shared.
We have two questions in the chat.
Oh, thank you.
We have one from Julie who is asking, for those who didn't attend yesterday, is there a possible short recap of the meeting, or will there be recording available?
Yes, so we did record that meeting, and I did remember to start recording this meeting a little bit late, but I did start the recording. We do have that, and we can put that up on our website, or else we can send you all a link to it, so that you can listen to it if you like. I imagine a lot of the same ground will be covered today, but there will be, I'm sure, some differences between the two meetings. So we'll make sure you have access to that recording. And has it been discussed having an option for short reports? Seems like sometimes, especially with small projects, doing a full report isn't always needed. I will have to let maybe Ashley or Lindsay reply to that.
I can reply, and Lindsay can follow up. So we have a template on our website that agencies can use for their projects. They are not required to use our report template on our website. The only caveat to that is that our office expects that information to be in the documentation or the report that you are submitting. So you need to have, your historic context, you need to have your methodology, your APE, all of that information, your record search information. All of that has to be within that report that you're submitting to our office, but you're not required to use our report template.
And I see that Shannon has dropped into the chat a link to, on our State Historical Society website on the SHPO page, we have added an ICRIS sub-page, and that's where we're putting up the information session videos, and we can put these videos up there as well as documents, relevant documents that may be of interest. So Shannon, do you want to share the archaeological site form comparison like you did the built environment one for folks to see?
Sure, let me just navigate to that. Just one second.
So for those of you who weren't able to attend the first ICRIS informational session that was last week, that is already posted up on the website, and you can listen to that. That was an hour-long session of really just a lot of question and answer. And then we'll be doing more of those sessions as we move forward, and the ICRIS is further developed, and sharing demonstration videos and things like that with you as well, so you get a feel for what the system will look like. So I'll let Shannon explain the site form changes.
Okay, so this is the current ASI site form, and similar to what I did with the IHSI form, the red highlighted fields are fields that we have removed, and the green are the auto-calculated or pulling data from somewhere else within ICRIS. So site name will still be a field, but it is an optional field. The attachments and associated records, this checkbox area will be gone, but there is an area for uploading attachments where you can specify that it's a particular type of an attachment. So you can see we've got rid of a lot of this information that can just be generated on the fly. We did add a new site type field, and I have actually added that to that ICRIS website that I put in the chat. You can see the list of the primary site types that we're planning on using, but we are open to suggestions for additions to that list if you feel that there's something that's missing. We're also adding a brief resource description. This is currently what we call the attributes in our GIS that just says lithic scatter and, a projectile point and 12 lithic flakes. So this would just be a very brief description for including in GIS for on the glance description of the resource. Site type is now just going to be those choices between archaeological site, building structure, etc. So this section goes away. The themes, this is now going to be, actually, it was more appropriately called the area of significance. And so we have just gotten rid of this section and just made it area of significance to be more aligned with the National Register requirements. The time periods will still be on the new form, except it will be a drop down where you can select one or many instead of checkboxes. And the eligibility is all going to be the same with the exception of this if not eligible. So there will just be one comment field as instead of two. Let's see, the impacts will all be dropped down with the same options. Sediments is now a text box as opposed to a drop down with percentages. Let's see, what else? Oh, we did add another 2 fields to this section, the artifact repository. So that will be a drop down with the 3 repositories, the Archaeological Survey of Idaho repositories, and then the option of other, where you could list an additional repository if the artifacts are being stored somewhere other than those 3. And then a place to describe or list which artifacts were collected. Environment section, we did away with the permanent water distance because it's something that can be calculated using GIS. The not so popular section on vegetation and percentages, we have omitted that and created a new field that will be the environmental description, which would include vegetation and landform. And then on the sections specific to prehistoric or historic properties, we got rid of quite a few of these fields and have basically summarized it into a text box of artifact and feature description. And I have posted this PDF on that website. So if you would like to go through and read each of the little pop-ups, you feel more than welcome to do that. And that's my little presentation on that.
And those, those fields were variously added or removed or combined based a lot on the survey that we had put out last year, asking specifically which fields folks felt were most important, most relevant, or those that they didn't feel were useful at all. And then also based on internal conversation where, there were certain of these fields that have never really been very useful to our staff or to researchers because they either aren't typically filled out or weren't filled out well. And so we certainly weren't cavalier about removing fields, but we felt there was no need to perpetuate fields that weren't really being useful to anybody, whether that be our office or researchers who might utilize our data at some point. Any more questions, comments, concerns, thoughts? Tammy.
Hi, so I was in the meeting yesterday and I did cogitate on a few things, and I was curious if you could sort of discuss how easy or how friendly the database will be for cutting and pasting from our existing documentation into it, or possibly even cutting and pasting and exporting information out of it in the future.
I'm going to let Shannon answer that.
That is actually something that I've been discussing with the developers. I wanted to make sure that it would easily take a copied and pasted piece of text from like a Word document with lots of formatting, but still take it and put it in there and not have a lot of issues. So they are testing that out just to make sure that it will function properly.
Great, that's great to hear. And I guess if nobody else has their hand up, I'll do part 2 of my question. Kind of going back to what we were talking about in the beginning with the historic site form, which will be, I guess, a property type. I'm curious because we are being asked currently to sort of approach, for instance, our administrative site forms differently and record them as a district with all of the buildings as separate sites within. I'm curious why people are being asked to do that now rather than maybe waiting until this is built and it looks like it might be a much simpler exercise.
I think in fact, we have been telling folks to wait for ICRIS. Ashley, is that not accurate?
Yeah, that's accurate. Yeah. Normally a lot of the documentation that we have are old Xerox copies from the 90s. So we're asking that documentation to be updated once ICRIS is live to make it a lot easier and not do it now. So just sort of wait for it to go live and then update that documentation.
Okay, well, in instances where I didn't hear that was the case, I'll make sure people know that. Thanks.
In the absence of any hands raised, I'll bring up a question that we had for folks yesterday that we'd like to hear your opinions on. The ICRIS, when fully developed, will be through a GIS, of course, and we are right now sort of building that GIS and trying to determine what layers that we would include as sort of standard layers in the subscription version of the GIS. And Shannon, I'm putting you on the spot here. Hopefully not too much. Did you have the list readily available or not so difficultly available of the ones we've identified so far, but we're seeking your input for other layers that you feel would be useful to have included in the standard GIS layers. So Shannon can run through those really quickly.
So with the map, we have some basic layers that we will be including, like from our current ArcGIS Online. We have National Registered Districts, the certified local government boundaries, and the boundaries for our existing multiple property documentation. The basic information that we'll have for layers will be obviously a state outline and counties, kind of still on the fence about legislative districts, incorporated cities, the boundaries of those cities, and then the PLSS. That will be on all the maps, regardless of which piece you're doing data entry into. And then we have these additional layers, which we're calling the added value layers. And so we've got like tribal contact data or mining. There's from the Idaho Geological Survey, mining layer, ITD districts, land management layer. And then I've got a few that I still haven't found the authoritative data. But we were thinking of ecosystem and soils and watershed, the individual forest boundaries, hot springs, state parks, Idaho Department of Lands, quad map, and BLM field offices. So this was just kind of a quick run through of things that we were thinking would be beneficial to have in the GIS. And Ashley and I kind of came up with those on the fly. So are there any other layers that you all think would be of value? I'll let you ponder that one. And if you think of any, please feel free to email me. And if you have a link to the authoritative data for that information, that's mostly what I'm looking for.
Michael, roads. Yeah, I thought we had something about roads on there yesterday, or did we talk about them yesterday as well?
We talked about the Tiger roads and I have not added it to the list yet.
Yeah, I was gonna say rivers and streams too, but Julie beat me to it. Big water bodies, maybe even.
So I believe that the watershed layer has multiple pieces that you can turn on and off that have rivers and large bodies of water, but I will double check and make sure that that is true.
No other comments, thoughts, questions, concerns? Would roads be included in the ITD layer? Same with waterways on Forest Service or ITF or other land management maps. The ITD layer referenced in this list is the district boundaries. So ITD has 6 districts, and that's what that would be. So probably not, although I don't know, Matt, maybe you can answer the question. Would ITD have some GIS layers of state highways, state roads that could be put on the system?
We have a lot of GIS layers, so maybe we can go over it with you, what we have. And, you know, they're always being updated and everything.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Because there might be some other stuff that is of interest that we aren't even thinking of at the moment.
Thank you. Yeah, that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just ramble on a bit, I guess. We still have a lot of time. If folks want to think about questions or comments they'd like to make. We are currently scheduled to be going live with ICRIS on December 5th. I think I suspect that date is not entirely fixed. Just as things move forward. We may push that out or even pull it back a little bit. There have been some changes that we've made as we've gone along that will speed up the process, and others that will slow it down a little. So we have regular bi-weekly meetings with our developers where they update us of the current go live date. And right now it's December 5th, I believe. So be watching for that, and we'll be developing training, specific training for how to use the system, as we get closer to go live. I know one question is, sort of, is that it at go live? Are we, do we submit only using ICRIS from that point forward? And that certainly will be our goal. So that's what we'll be looking for all of you to do. But we also recognize that, there's going to be a transition period, and we're going to need to be flexible and patient, all of us, I hope, as we smooth through the rough patches and get everything moving. But we're really pleased with our developers. We think they're being very responsive to our desires and needs, and they seem to be doing a great job from our perspective. So we're hoping that go live will be as smooth as it could possibly be. But do watch for training on our website, and we'll certainly be sending out notifications of those as well. So most of those will probably just be remote, but we may look at doing some in-person trainings if it seems like there's any logic to that. So I see someone mentioned that slope would be nice to see as well as a GIS layer. So we'll look at the availability of adding that as well. Steph.
I had a question, and maybe we covered this about, I know we talked about photos, attaching photos to the resource records. What are the standards for mapping, site maps? Are we going to do location maps anymore if it's a GIS-based system? And forgive me if we've already gone over this. I popped out for a dental appointment yesterday, but.
Oh, no, that's fine. We certainly haven't covered it today. And I don't believe we specifically covered that yesterday. So Shannon, I'm gonna let you answer that.
Thanks.
I am not quite sure that we've gotten through that part of our requirements. I believe we were still wanting a sketch map for archaeological sites. But if Lindsay is on, maybe she can address that.
Yeah, I can take that. Yes, so we will be requesting sketch maps for our sites. Even with it being GIS based, we need a little bit of that kind of specificity of exactly where things are in relation to each other at the site level. I know a lot of you guys now will do your maps in the field in like on a Trimble or some other GIS program. And that's completely fine. You don't have to necessarily sketch it with pen and paper like we used to back in the day. But we will still be requiring that site forms have a map attached to them in some form.
And the same would hold for built environment properties where there might be, multiple buildings or structures on the site. A sketch map to kind of provide that context will still be required, but we'll be using, in terms of mapping the site boundaries or the survey boundaries and your APE, that will all be done through ICRIS directly into the GIS. Shane.
Yeah, I was wondering if you have any idea yet about how data will be accessible back out to users. So, we typically in the past, of course, have furnished the SHPO's office a PDF of final site forms, and then we also retain a copy of that and manage that data over here. But so in this case, if it's all direct data entry into your system, then what will come back to researchers using ICRIS if they need site forms? Does all the new data go into a PDF? Is that what will be coming back? And is there some way to get native data if we need it and want it for our own system?
So I can start this answer, but I think Shannon will probably have to elaborate. We will have sort of an output printable site form that you can print if you want a hard copy for some reason. And that's where I'm going to have to stop and let Shannon take the rest of that question.
Yes, we will have some way to export a PDF of all the data entry for a previous version that maybe you have, there's an existing data in the system and then you've done an update. You could have two separate exports of that data in PDF form. Yesterday, we did have a request to make sure that the UTMs were printed on that PDF. And so that has been added to our list of wants and needs for the export. They have not designed it yet, but yes, there will be some kind of export. And then I'm not sure how exporting all of the rest of the things like photos and the sketch map, I believe that that'll all be individual. But like I said, we haven't gotten that far in the development.
I'll add, as we're talking about being in the field, we, as part of this project, we're also developing a field application that that you can take on your mobile device and, you know, do your data entry in the field and take your photographs. And then when you return to the office, do like a batch upload. We were very, very clear with the developers that it had to be a batch upload and not just, you know, individual site forms one at a time. So that mobile app will be available, but you won't be required to use it. It'll just be available for your use if you want to.
Tricia, you might want to
Yeah.
mention for subscription level.
Yeah, yeah. So there will be parts of ICRIS will be subscription based. There is a guest access, and that is for the general public who will be able to access our system and, you know, look around at the resources, much like if any of you have ever looked at our National Register map on our website. It'll be much like that. They can look at individual properties. These will be only built environment, non-restricted properties. We will have back of the house ability to provide permissions for users. And just the same way we do now, in essence, you know, before we share any of our data or information with anybody, you know, they have to submit documentation of their professional qualifications to our office. So that will all continue to happen. And once we have that information, we will provide permissions to users. There will be a basic user element that if that is not subscription based, that can be used for free to upload projects to the system and to us. And so that can all happen digitally. But the sort of value added elements, the GIS layers, the having essentially a dashboard or a work queue that allows you to track your projects both internally and then when they come to our office, those will be subscription based. We haven't worked out exactly what those subscription costs will be at this time, but we're working on that. The main point for us is that currently right now we generate revenue for our office that's critical for the you know, running of our office through our site record searches. We generate a fairly significant amount of money every year for our program through that process. But trying to code that was going to be very, very, very expensive to continue to charge for individual site records or site record searches. I'm sorry, project record searches. So we are shifting to a subscription-based system where it'll be an annual membership that individuals, organizations, or federal agencies would pay into. As I said, we don't know what that's going to be yet. What I can say is that the federal subscription price will be significantly less than the private company subscription price. But we think everyone will find that it's well worth it because it's, we think that the efficiencies that we will all realize will make it worth it for everybody. Questions, comments, concerns, thoughts? One thing I like to let you all know, just because I think it's worth mentioning, Shannon Valine has been working really literally 40 hours a week on this process for months. And, you know, it's been a Herculean endeavor for really our whole office, but particularly for Shannon. So when things go really well, make sure you give Shannon a pat on the back. Will there be an option to opt out and submit projects the way we do now? I mean, not exactly the way we do now. As I mentioned, there will be a basic user option that will allow you to submit electronically through the iCRIS system. So yes, that will be available to users. How is legacy data being handled? Do we have to go back and resubmit decades of site reports? I'm gonna let Shannon answer that. I think the answer to the second part is no. But I'll let Shannon answer.
So we are going to be taking all of our existing data and putting it into iCRIS, and we're transforming the data based on whatever changes we've made to those fields. And then the site forms that we have, we currently have them as a single PDF for each resource. And so that will be attached to the site record. I'm not sure, are you referring to anything specific, Jennifer? Well, I can follow that up with saying that I do know that our current ASI database, what was collected for decades, was quite minimal. Once I started a little over 10 years ago, I started implementing doing the data update for all of the fields, but anything prior to my tenure will have very minimal data that's put into the database. So some of those legacy archaeological site records will be fairly sparse when you go to do an update. So Julie, the site update, sorry, Trisha, I'm just gonna take this one too. The site update will, when you go to update a resource, it will pull over all of the data that is currently in the database. And then you will go in and update whatever needs to be updated. For some of those legacy archaeological sites that I was referring to with the minimal amount of data, there may be some additional data entry that you will need to do in order to have the system call that a complete record, basically the required fields. But it shouldn't be cumbersome.
And the updates won't delete the original because the original will be preserved as legacy data as a PDF. So that original data will always be available, and the various iterations of it over the years that may have been updates.
And Jennifer, you had asked about monitoring forms. It would be essentially the same process of updating a site form, where all of that data would pull over and you would update whatever fields need to be updated, and then you could append or attach your monitoring form to that record.
So for clarification, we will be doing the data entry for older data. I mean, right now it's standard practice that if a site form hasn't been updated for 10 years, we ask that it be updated to current standards, because those older data forms were somewhat sparse, as Shannon says, or they've just changed and evolved over the years. So we do currently ask for that. But what the system will do for you is it will populate the fields that exist, many of which may not need to actually be changed. So you'll only need to change the fields that actually need to be changed, if they do need to. These are a quiet group. Shannon, do you have anything else you could share that would maybe spark some questions, or just
It
to
looks like
share?
we have a raised hand.
Oh, all right, Reese.
Question. So for record searches and for specific project locations and whatnot, I think you guys kind of briefly touched on it last session, but how will the interface work, and how finite is the interface going to be for the project location? Can you basically upload shape files and download shape files, or is that not even communicate with each other?
I'll let Shannon answer.
Yes, there will be a way to upload your project APE or your survey area or the resource location. So yes, you can upload or you can draw on the map yourself. When you are doing a record search, you can upload a shapefile and it would pull up a list of all of the resources that are within that boundary, a list of all of the previous surveys that are within that area. And you could export those as a CSV file, or if you have a subscription, you'd be able to export them as a shapefile.
Got it. And then uploading would be the same interface. And I'm sure there's a certain format. I don't know if it needs to be a specific file format in ArcGIS or CAD. I'm not sure which one would be preferred.
Whatever will be ingested into an Esri product. So that's pretty broad.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Yep.
Well, Shannon, do you have any other things you could share with the system, pages to show them or anything?
Let me take a look. We haven't really shown any of the map information, mostly because the resource GIS has not been loaded into this production site that we're working with. But this is just kind of an overview of what it looks like. I can show you if you haven't seen it before, but what it looks like to upload a new survey. There's some basic information. This is an unassociated survey report that I'm doing
You'll have
here.
to share your screen, Shannon.
Oh gosh, sorry. Thank you. Okay, so this is an unassociated survey report. So that means that it's something that does not have an active project related to it. We created this so that if there's any legacy surveys that you all have out there that are not in our system, you would have an easy way to send that to us where you're not actually asking for any concurrence or any project comment, but you just want us to have that information in our system. So that's what the purpose of this unassociated survey report is. But you can see that it automatically knows who I am. So it pulls over my name as the author. You can enter in a project number. You can enter in some keywords that might be relevant. This is optional, but for some of those reports that maybe don't have that may have some more information about a particular like XRF or typology that would be useful for researchers, this would be where you would put that in. Then you would upload your PDF and put any comments. And then you would go in and start drawing your survey area. I would ask you how you generated this information and the site, the survey class. Turn this other one off. You can add multiple shapes. If you want to do them, draw them individually, or if you're uploading and they're separate shapes, they would show up here in a list. And then it comes up with a summary of what you've done. And then it tells you, which this part is not working properly at the moment, but it tells you all the summaries that have pulled from the GIS. And then you hit submit. And this is what a survey record would look like. I don't really have any other things to demo for you. I had kind of skipped through a bunch of this resource information. But like I said, that one is still definitely a work in progress. Creating a project is, there's different project types. And does that spark any questions? Cami?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could show that project type drop-down list for a little longer.
Oh, yeah. So we have annual report, CLG survey, eligibility review, MOA. Actually, that one is going to go away. PA comment review, section 106 and section 110. And this is not the order that they will be in the list.
Great, thanks.
And I have put in all of the agencies into a data file. So you just need to start typing in anything and then it'll pull up. I don't know if it's fully functioning right now. Let's see. Okay, so this is a survey boundary and it has an associated survey number and an associated project. So I don't think that they built this out yet. Oh, there's some minimal information here. But this is the basic functionality that it should have. Yes, Cami.
Okay, so that I have another question after looking at that. We talked yesterday about the fact that we will have agency number crosswalks. Not sure what that will look like, in the data portion of it, but in this mapping part, would there be a way for us to look things up by agency number? I was looking at those numbers and those probably aren't anything. I know this is the BLM, but I'm thinking that it might not be something we would be able to track if we didn't have SHPO assigned numbers, I assume, that maybe we don't capture.
So,
Um,
this was just searching by the map, but then there's also the tabular search here on the side. And we haven't quite figured out all of the fields, but there is keyword, county, organization, project number. So that would be your forest project number.
Oh, that's terrific. Great, thanks.
Yes, and we'll have the same for resources. The agency field number would be something that you could search by.
Good to hear.
And as well as the temporary field number, right, Shannon, when those,
Yeah.
from when those existed, I mean.
Yeah,
there
so
may, yeah.
we opted to keep the two preliminary number system that's on the current ASI form, where you have field number and agency number, mostly so that if the agency has hired a contractor and the contractor has issued temporary numbers to the resources, that we could still continue to track that after the agency has gone in and put in their agency numbers. And then it finally gets its Smithsonian number. But if we needed to backtrack from the Smithsonian number all the way down to when they were in the field to match up maybe field notes or something, we wanted to make sure we captured that data too.
No, that's terrific. And so that adds another question. So I think you guys are aware, there's a lot of sites out there that have been re-recorded over the years or merged. And so they have multiple Smithsonian numbers. Will those numbers be captured in that in a field as well?
Yes. I have been working very diligently on figuring out which resources have multiple numbers, particularly ones that cross county line. And so we've worked with the developer so that we can reference those all together as one site, but you could type in any one of those Smithsonian numbers and it would bring you back to that one resource record. And then it would show you a list.
Okay, so from any Smithsonian, you could get to whatever the master Smithsonian is, if that is that how it's going to work? Okay.
Yes.
And so going forward, because I don't think we fixed all the bad sites out there yet, there probably will be a process for tweaking things and merging things in the future. Would that be something that we would just probably need to work with you, sort of sidebar stuff? You referenced yesterday that there would be weird things that you would be able to kind of do as the master of the database, right?
That is correct. We haven't made a module for like merging two resources together. I believe that'll be something down the road. So until that happens, it would be submitting that resource form, and it would need to have some way of calling out to me that, hey, I'm merging these two, and then I would do that on the back end.
Great. Okay.
Hopefully we don't have a lot of those.
I'm hoping we're getting ahead of that game. Yeah.
All right, still waiting to hear any other questions, comments, concerns. We've got another 40 minutes scheduled, but if if there's really no other questions or comments, we can certainly end early, but I don't want to cut anybody off, so I'll keep waiting a few more minutes.
Just kind of noodling through here just to give you guys some further views. So each organization would have an organization page with their contact information. And then all of the users that are part of that organization. Each user has their own page where it gives details about when they signed up, their contact information, any qualification documents that they may have submitted, the opportunity to change password or change email.
This is Cammie, if you don't mind me just jumping in. Yeah, I do have a question on that. I'm sure you guys have covered it, but will you remind me how we add new people? Do they add themselves or, and is that, okay, go ahead.
Let me log out. So this will be the login page. If you already have a login, you can just click to log in. It is a multi-factor authentication requirement. So when you click login, you'll have to go to your email and click a link to activate all the information just for security purposes. But if you are new, you can click register and start typing your information. And then you get into organization, and if the organization already exists, you can select it. If it doesn't, it'll let you continue, but it'll give me an error that you're trying to register and the organization is not in our system. But that is how we're going to keep track of that. Does that answer your question, Cammie?
Yeah, it does. Looks pretty straightforward, like everywhere else we sign up, right?
Yeah, it should, hopefully.
The multi-factor authentication, we were hoping to maybe avoid that, but the state's ITS department said it's mandatory, so we have to do that. So for creating a project, a federal agency can create a project, or a private contractor can create a project, and it'll be really dependent on the federal agency involved, who will do that. Some agencies will prefer to create a project and then send it to a contractor to do the work. And if that's what the situation is, then when the contractor has completed all the work and uploaded all the appropriate files, they would send it back to the federal agency, and the federal agency submits it to our office. So you would always have that review authority. We do have some agencies we refer to as bypass agencies, and these are federal agencies that don't typically do the direct consultation with us. Those are agencies like FCC for cell towers. HUD delegates their authority to usually the local governments, things like that. So in those scenarios, the consultants or whoever is preparing the project can submit directly to our office, but that will all be coded on the back end. So if you're not a bypass agency like the Forest Service or the BLM, it would the contractor or whomever else would not be able to submit it to our office. They would only be able to submit it to you, and then you would submit it to us. Well,
I'm kind of
Oh.
at a loss for.
yeah, I know. Unless we get some questions or comments, I guess I'll just remind you all that we do have, continuing regularly scheduled updates that will be happening. I think there's one more here at the very end of August, and then they'll be in September, October, and November. We'll presumably by then have more demos that we can show you, more, actively engaged elements of the system for you to see. And then, as I said, we'll be creating and sharing training as we get closer to go live. Shannon did put in the chat the link to our website, but if you don't grab that in time, yeah, it's just history.idaho.gov and then the SHPO page, and then there's an ICRIS widget on the side. So it'll take you to the first informational session that we did last week, a video of that, and then those forms that Shannon shared, or at least the ASI form, and we can stick the IHSI form up there as well as that list of primary site types for you to take a look at regarding archaeological sites, and let us know if you see anything missing, if you feel anything else needs to be added onto there. We're happy to add more to that list. Well, I'm thinking we might just give you back a half hour of your day today, unless we hear something more from anybody. But we do appreciate you taking the time out. As we said, we know you're all very busy, but we're pretty excited about this. We really feel we're going to build a lot of efficiency in our process and in your processes as well. And so, but we're here for questions, and anytime you want to reach out to us, you can. One thing I do want to emphasize is that ICRIS is not going to eliminate, person-to-person conversation, and that you can continue to email and call our office anytime. Just because we automate some steps to make us a little more efficient doesn't mean that we're removing that sort of human element from our consultation process. So please keep that in mind as we move forward with our ICRIS system. So seeing no other hands raised, I guess we'll say thank you very much for coming, and look forward to maybe seeing you at the next informational sessions.